Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Nature Journaling. This session will be about 50 minutes. My name is Sierra Stukenholtz, and I work for Wild Rivers Conservancy as the volunteer coordinator. I will be in the background moderating the chat and helping with any technical difficulties during this session. Before we begin, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping notes. On the right of your screen, you'll see the chat box. To keep things simple, chat is where we're going to have you put your questions and comments today. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just type those questions into the chat and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded and will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube account. With the housekeeping out of the way, I would like to introduce our speaker and give the rest of the time to her. Please welcome Lisa Meyers McClintick, a teaching artist, freelance writer, and photographer.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I need to be aware of the delay or not. Great to be with you today. I'm going to get my screen shared here so you can see what I pulled together. And I just wanted to share with you my practice of nature journaling. It actually started when I started journaling when I was in 3rd grade. And I started my first nature journal in 5th grade. We did a class trip to Long Lake Conservation Center, and I think that was part of our homework. And I kind of, that was my only themed one at the time, but I have been journaling nonstop since 3rd grade. I am up to probably 96. I think I've lost track because now I'm starting to do more visual illustrated journals versus just writing, but it is a huge part of my life and keeps me grateful and balanced and mentally healthy, I think, too. Just it's a great way to process things you see and experience day to day and not forget those wonderful moments that get lost in the chaos of a day. This is my collection of journals, or at least some of it. And I actually had to start numbering them because I was getting them all mixed up. But when you've been doing it as long as I have, they really add up. And it's quite a legacy to be able to have. I started doing just small journals at first, or small illustrations at first. Mostly it's been writing until probably 10 years ago. And my biggest reasons for journaling are to really get your thoughts focused, which is a lot harder for your generation. There are so many digital distractions and games and news and TikToks, everything coming at you from every direction. And it can be hard to kind of find that quiet space to focus your thoughts, get your brain and your body calm down, and really tap into not what's in front of your eyes, but what your whole body is taking in, the sounds, the smells, and just really feel grounded in the moment, especially out in nature. And when you've got that quiet in your mind and you can just sit and be there, I think that's when you get a lot of creativity going because your brain's got room to move around. It's got room to be creative and go, I wonder, and to really start studying things and asking questions. Oops, sorry about that. These last 2 pictures are from St. Croix State Park, and did a drive there. And I mean, whether you're in your backyard or you have a park nearby, take time to just park the car, find a bench, find a trail, and look around, see what catches your eye. What kind of sounds are you hearing? Are you hearing birds? And if so, do you know which ones? There's some great tools to learn bird songs now that there never were when I was a kid. What are you smelling? Do you smell like fall leaves? Do you smell that earthy smell you get in the first of spring as the leaves start to thaw and come out and unfurl? Sometimes you'll start having flowers blossoming. You can smell that on the air. And what are you feeling? Is it damp? Is it humid? Is it dry? Is it so cold that it hurts to inhale in the middle of winter? Maybe not this winter. And it's great to be able to study the seasons. That's one of the things I think is the coolest about having a nature journal. We always think about the 4 seasons with winter, spring, summer, and fall. But if you're in Japan, they actually have it broken down into 72 micro seasons. And that is so true. I've learned that from nature journaling. It's about every 5 days, it seems, there's something new. The flowers, the leaves start to bud, and then they open. You've got animals coming from migration. You've got bears coming out of hibernation. I put the bear illustration in early, since I'm in St. Cloud, and we've had a bear in southern St. Cloud. If there's any creature on this earth that deserves the description of hangry, I think it would be a bear coming out of hibernation and not having been able to eat all winter. I'd be ready to raid a few bird feeders too. There's always something continually happening, and nature can go so fast too. I mean, if you've ever watched, like, if you had any projects in class where you might have watched tadpoles turn into frogs. I mean, it's a fast process. And the more you pay attention, the more you see how things are changing day to day. And it's just so cool to watch. Nests are built, flowers bloom, fruits ripen. You can watch the babies leave their nests. Last year, I noticed there were a lot of babies coming out. There was a lost squirrel in the parking lot of my dentist. We had a lost robin fledgling in our backyard that finally found its parent. But, every week there's some fresh drama going on that is it's exciting. Seeds, even if once the flowers are gone, if you look at different seeds, those are really cool to study. They all have such unique engineering to them, and in the fall, every few days, you've got fresh colors as something new changes with the season. And then you can watch all the birds gather for migration. I think seeing those big clouds of birds that swoop across fields is one of the neatest sights you can see in the fall. There are a lot of great science apps you can tap into. There is Merlin app that you can have a phone, and you can hit record, and it will tell you the bird songs it's hearing, and it will highlight it as each one sings. So that's a great way to figure out what birds are making the noises. I don't know if anybody's got cranes near them, but they make that really strange, throaty, sound that sounds so old. I swear it's been around since pterodactyls, but it's like, I mean, I'm not very good at it, but if you Google it, it's Santo cranes, and they make just such a unique sound. And even if they're very high above, you can usually hear them calling out if they're going overhead. What do you see in the trees? And where you see a bird helps you identify it. If it's on a shrub, if it likes prairie grasslands, if it's high in a pine tree, that all gives you clues to what kind of bird it might be. Meadows and farm fields are great to watch this time of year because you can usually see the cranes. And I started off with birding, really enjoying the big birds because they're just easier to identify and figure out. The swans, the cranes, hawks, those things that really stand out. And pay attention to what they're doing because their behavior always alters through the season. There was one year I was driving past a farm field, and I saw a couple of cranes, and they kept dipping their heads down. They picked something up off of this empty farm field because it hadn't been planted yet, and they kept tossing things back and forth into the air, and I kept thinking, what are they doing? I thought, well, maybe they're picking things up, flicking them through the air, trying to get bugs loose so they could eat them. And that wasn't it. It was part of they were flirting. That was their way to go, hey, how are you? Kind of like kids like to tease each other if they like somebody and goof off. And that's what the birds were doing. That was their version of dating. And sometimes they will hop up and down and kind of do this gawky dance that's fun to watch too. And you can usually see babies usually around June or so. That too is another great aspect of nature journaling. I've been able to figure out what's a good time of year to see things that are specific, such as the baby goslings, the colts, which are the baby cranes, when to watch out for the babies that might be of songbirds that might be leaving their nest. Bugs are fun to watch for. I've always paid attention to flowers, but only in the last year or so I've really been looking a lot more clearly, and it is fascinating how many different kinds of bees there are, not just bumblebees and not just wasps. But if you really start looking, it's so cool because they'll have different color belts on the bees and different spots. And there are sweat bees. So really horrible name, but they are beautiful. Some of them have just a really high metallic sheen to them, and they're fascinating to watch. They seem to like a lot of the flowers in my garden. You can see in this photo that there is one called, what was that one called? A Scudder's Bush katydid, and it blended in just perfectly with the leaves. Bugs have a lot of things that help them be camouflaged. So sometimes you have to look really hard to find that. And, there's a lot you can find without even leaving your yard if you have some flowers or plantings nearby. We've always had toads in our window well, and that's been fun to watch for our kids. Every year we've got toady shows up. I don't know how many generations of toady we're on, but they're fun to have in the garden, and they always have a very distinctive call at night that makes it fun to go outside after dark and listen to them.
Lisa?
Yes.
I don't think we're seeing your photos.
Oh, no. Not at all?
Nope, I don't think so. I think we're just seeing your face right now.
Oh, shoot. Okay, let me go back, see if I can figure this out. Okay, I am so sorry about that. That has to be really boring.
Oh, no worries. I wonder if you turned off your camera and then maybe did the screen sharing.
Good idea. Okay, come on, get over there. Does that make a difference?
I'm not seeing it just yet, but it might be loading. I'll give it a second here. I don't see it just yet.
Okay. All right, there's my camera off. Screen. Why is that not working?
Oops, something just came up. Yep, I think so.
Okay. All right. I am so sorry about that. And of course, now I'm not sure how to get the whole thing showing. Okay, I apologize about that. But here's the bear I was talking about. Everything, you can see it now?
I can see the bear, yes.
Okay, all right. So that was our bear that came this spring. This was my first nature log that I had talked about. And those are the number of journals I have. Some people ask me what's the best journal to use, and it is whatever is handy and whatever you are willing to use. Maybe it has to fit in the pocket. Maybe it needs thicker pages if you prefer marker or some sort of wetter paint. Best journal is whatever you are comfortable with using. Okay, so talked about why to journal. There's the photos of the St. Croix State Park. Okay, there's what talking about studying the seasons. Those are some drawings that were from the spring at Croix Park here in St. Cloud, and just some of the first things that pop open, the tiny leaves and flowers. And those are the birds with the Santo crane and the colt and the chickadee. And those are some of the bugs. And it is really fascinating to learn about bugs. There are lots of native bees that they make nests under the leaves or in the soil. They don't have the hives you might think about. Those are honeybees that are not native. So it's always good to leave a little bit of debris and things on your lawn so that they can thrive. I started out just with really small sketches in my journals years ago before we had kids. And, it doesn't have to be fancy or perfect. It can be rough drawings. This one I have of the blue jays was such a cool day because I was having a bad day. It was not a happy day, and I was just frustrated. I looked outside, and there were these two blue jays. They had a long string that they were holding between them, and they were flying in between the branches of the tree trying to build their nest, and they couldn't do it. They kept getting tangled up, and all I could think of was, well, I'm glad it's not just me having a bad day. You can find lots of answers out in nature. Let's see if I can do this to fill the whole screen. Can you see okay now?
Yes, I can see the whole screen.
Okay. And try to be really patient with yourself if you're new to drawing or haven't done a lot of drawing. If everybody can grab a piece of paper and either a pen or a pencil, I want to do this quick exercise because it's kind of a fun way to warm up. If you are going to do some drawing, it helps you loosen up and not take it so seriously. What I'd like you to do is take a piece of paper and whatever you choose to write with, pencil or pen, and put it in your non-dominant hand, which would mean if you're right-handed, put it in your left. If you're typically left-handed, put it in your right. And try doing just a quick drawing of this maple leaf. And don't just do the outline. You can do a few of the vein lines through the leaf if you want, but do it quick and don't overthink it. Just kind of do a loose drawing with that non-dominant hand and see how that goes. I'll give you just a few minutes to do that. Usually if we're doing this live and in person, there's usually a lot of giggling because it can be humbling to try to draw with a hand we're not used to working with. It gets a little clumsy. And the importance of this exercise to me is that the reason you have struggled to use your non-dominant hand is you're not practicing with it all the time. And anytime you're drawing, if you're not someone who draws a lot, it's just going to take practice. And I don't want anybody who wants to try nature journaling to give up right away or get frustrated with it because you think you're not good enough. I've been drawing for like the last 8 to 10 years, just practicing a lot. And just did some drawings when I was younger. And it's so easy to quit or just put it away because you don't think you're good enough. And it's not about trying to be good and draw pretty drawings with nature journaling. It's about being in the moment. It's about enjoying what you see. And there's something about drawing an object that is just much more magical than taking a picture because it's like your brain's connecting with your hand, which is connecting to the paper. And it's just a much more creative and memorable project. And I remember one person saying to me that she might forget where she took a picture sometimes, but she never forgets something that she sketches because you're right there in the moment and you just learn so much more about what you sketch because you have to pay attention better to the details, and it's a slower process and you're in the moment a lot more and just enjoy going out and having sort of a scavenger hunt in nature and finding things that intrigue you, that bring you joy, that spark your curiosity. And it could be even weird stuff. It doesn't have to be pretty things. Like my parents have a log by lake they live on in northern Minnesota, and it always has this oozy yellow orange stuff that comes up on the log, and it's called witch's butter, which I think it's a fungus, but we always laugh because where else can you find something called witch's butter? There's just really fun things when you start drawing and paying attention and then start doing a little research to figure out what it is that you just found. Let's see, get to this next one. And don't always assume that fall is the prettiest time. I mean, we know spring is beautiful with lots of flowers and fresh green trees, but we also have a red maple in our front yard, and the leaves are so gorgeous in the spring. Take a little time this spring and study some of those leaves that are just emerging. They're translucent, and the sun can really glow through them. It's quite remarkable. Another thing is if I've got something to draw and it seems a little overwhelming, like there's too many details, especially if you're doing like a landscape drawing of, trying to do a whole scene. If I'm doing something that's got a lot of details, like this is a close up of some lichen and some moss that I took in northern Minnesota, just focus on a few elements of it. Okay, my slide is being weird. Focus on a few elements of it. Find some main parts of the picture that you can draw. On this one, I pulled out a few of the circles for what's known as pixie cup lichen. I love that name, pixie cups. They're just tiny, and look for shapes that you recognize, squares and triangles and circles, and then just start layering them together step by step. You can see on this lichen slide how I did that and just kept adding a little bit of detail and a little bit of more detail. And I do usually use a pencil first. I just like the ability to rough in a drawing before I use a pen, but you can do whatever you're comfortable with. Some people love going straight to pen or straight to marker or straight to paint. There's an example of some of the pixie cups with some paint added and some journaling to it and what it might look like on a journaling page. So this is another example of a sketch of lichen in process. They're kind of the round, ruffly things you might see on tree bark or rocks in your neighborhood or near parks. And I start with that roughly wiggly pencil sketch. I add in some outliner marker, and try to do some shadows and some texture. And then my last step is usually adding some paint or colored pencil. And this is what it looks like also on a journaling page. You can see, sorry, I hope it's not lagging too much for you. Hopefully it's popping up. It should be a slide that has green shield lichen on it. And sometimes I'm not always sure how my paint mixed up. And so you can do like a little swatch line of paints on the side of your page with either layering colored pencils or paints or your marker, just to make sure you like the color first before you put it on your actual drawing. Here's another example of a page that is in progress. And you might not be someone who even wants to color in your pages. Maybe you are just more interested in the science and the shapes and the details, and you want to get as much of that into your nature journal as possible. So on this page, the one that says like sunshine on a cloudy day, I try to do some close-ups with what a magnifying glass might see if I got really close to a patch of lichen on a rock. I don't know how many of you like to doodle. Some people are really good about it and really need something to doodle sometimes when they're maybe listening to a lecture or a presentation like now. Go with the doodling. Doodling is very relaxing, and it's fun, and it's sometimes not as intimidating as trying to do a drawing. But doodling very much becomes parts of a drawing. I mean, if you are into circles, they can become, the suckers on an octopus's leg. It could become parts of a flower. It could be parts of lichen pixie cups. Dotted lines can look like a farm field or a sandy beach. There's lots of ways you can do little lines that can turn into leaves and foliage, and just have lots of fun. If this is something that any of the teachers are interested in, I do have a PDF of this that you could share with your class. It's just, it gets you in the habit too of making time for a little bit of art, whether it's something simple or something that takes a little longer, like a drawing. When I am out on my hikes, I usually find, because I'm still working and still trying to take care of a lot of things in one day, I don't always have time to sit down and do any of my drawing actually out in nature, which I would have been able to do when I was your age, because we lived in the woods. And before you start getting hammered with homework, you can sit outside with just a pen or a pencil and do your drawing right in front of you, which is most ideal situation for nature journaling. But if I don't have time, or I know it's going to get dark soon, or I want to find as many things as possible, I will use my camera and take photos of the things that I'm finding fascinating, or things that are new along the hike since the week or two beforehand, and really pay attention to what has popped up. And maybe spend some time thinking about, okay, why am I finding this mushroom? Is it this kind of time of year that it always comes up? Is it because we finally got some rain? Certain critters eat this mushroom, or is it like to be by certain trees? It's a good time to really kind of study and think about what it is you found. I love these amanita mushrooms. They're also called agaric. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. It's a strange name, but I find them very beautiful. They look like something you'd find in a fairy tale or a storybook, but you don't eat them. It's always good to know what it is you're finding. Lots of places to learn more information, and just take a picture. That's the safest thing to do. And don't pick things when you're out. That's the other great thing about taking photos. That's a good way to have souvenirs of the places you visited in nature without having a bad effect on it. I don't know if any of you have this problem, but sometimes when I open up a fresh page, I feel a little bit of panic and think, oh my goodness, that's a big page, and I don't know where to start. So for me, one of the easiest things to do to make that less intimidating is to break the page down into grids or boxes. And you can do that with all sorts of things: rulers, straight edge of a postcard or an index card. You can use even a tag you might have gotten off a piece of clothing. Sometimes those are larger tags, and you can just tuck that into your nature journal for making fast and quick squares and circles. I'll use a compass. You can use cookie cutters, whatever it is that's handy around your house. And I break a page into lots of smaller areas that I can either fill in with things I've found, or I will fill it in with journaling and other information. Here's another example from another fall outing. This one also was St. Croix State Park, and it was the view from the fire tower, which that's another good lesson when you're out in nature and in the mood to explore, is to think about the different perspectives that are outside. I mean, don't always think as a human, an upright, two-legged human. Get down low. I mean, that's how I find things like the mushrooms. I make sure I look close to the ground, and that's where you find the cool mosses and lichen. If you can get to a park that has a fire tower or a nice hill or bluff that you can climb, then you get sort of that eagle eye view and that beautiful view from up high, and the trees tend to look like a big multicolored carpet instead of treetops. And it's a much different experience. And I like getting low to the ground and looking straight up into the trees in the fall. It's just a beautiful look. And you can imagine whether, maybe this is how it looks if I'm a chipmunk, or this is how it would look if I were an eagle. And it just gives you a different perspective on what you're seeing. Here's another page. This one had a lot to do with flowers and plants. I like to draw them. For one thing, they don't run away from me. And I can get up close, and I enjoy all the different patterns that you can find in plants. But it's also cool looking at the seeds. If you can see in the upper part of this page, there are butterfly weed seed pods. And butterfly weed is this beautiful orange flowered plant. It's like a fancy milkweed. and it's gorgeous when it's in bloom. And then when it has these pods, they're a bit like milkweed pods, but they look so funky and big and odd. They look like little alien pods to me, and I just find them intriguing. And when you start to study seeds, they all have marvelous ways of dispersing. You think of milkweed and how it has that beautiful fluff on it to catch the wind and blow away, or maple tree helicopters, how those go through the air and fall in early summer. And things like, think of cockleburs. I don't know how many of you have dogs or have yourself gone out for a hike in the woods and you come back and you've got all these burrs and stickers on you. But those are really well thought out bits of nature. They're meant to stick on you or animals because that's how the seeds get taken to new places, and that's how those plants grow in new areas. And you look at something like cockleburs, if you've ever looked at those closely, they've got lots of little hooks on them if you look really close, and the way they kind of catch onto fabric and fur is what I think inspired Velcro. That same kind of process of just really hanging on to something that helps them make their journey. Some people like the drawing process better. Some people like the writing more. When you're thinking of nature journaling from the approach, a more scientific approach, for sure make sure to write down the date and the location of something you've found out in nature. You want to know where it is. I've had it where if I found a flower I really loved and I want to know where it is the next year, I've got it in my notes. It helps me find it again. Take note of what the weather was like because things change year to year. A pond that you might find one spring that's beautiful and you can hear all the frogs and it's very active with migrating birds. It might not come back the next year depending on whether there's a lot of rain or not. Some years you've got like prairie potholes, especially in western Minnesota, that they're ponds that are only there in the spring when migrating birds are going through. And by the time you hit summer and there's less rain, they tend to dry up. So that can have quite an impact on the landscape and how animals and plants move around. And really study what you find. It's a great opportunity to just let your mind roam. I wonder, if this is something that's going to bloom quickly and then disappear, or wonder what animal likes to eat this berry, or, just really use your imagination. And things like this photo on this slide is of another kind of lichen, but, it reminds me of leaves. It looks so much like leaves attached to a rock. And think about, what different things in nature might have similarities and their connections that maybe you don't know about. And it really fuels your curiosity and helps you then move on and find out more about what you found. And the more you learn, the more curious you can get and the better questions you have. All right, losing my mouse here. I've always been someone who likes to collect things. One of my first collections was seashells because we lived for a year in Hawaii. But it's really fun to start a list of all the different things that you can find in nature. It could be shells. It could be bugs. How many bugs can I find just in my yard, or just in this small patch of garden, or just on a particular tree, and really track that and treat it almost like a science project. How many birds can you find? And does that change from month to month or week to week? How many different kinds do you see? What kinds of animals are you finding? There's certain times a year you see them a lot more. Flowers, when are the flowers blooming? There's a study called phenology that really tracks when things bloom each year, and it's fun to see how the weather can delay or speed things up depending on what the climate is like that particular year. Fungus, funky rocks. I know there's a lot of rock collectors out there. Are you finding agates? Are you finding quartz? Are you finding fossils? What is it that you can find when you're out and about? And then the little things like the communities of moss and lichen that look so cool when you look close down to the ground. You can also study one thing in particular and tell a story. You could follow, if you've got a caterpillar you found in your yard, or maybe you have it in your classroom, tell the story and illustrate how that caterpillar goes from something so teeny tiny into nice, big and fat and well-fed and turns into the chrysalis. Maybe you've got a bird's nest. Some people will get ones by their house or near a planter where they're able to actually watch the bird protecting its nest and then watch the eggs. Document how long it takes from nest to eggs to fledglings, and keep an eye on when those fledglings are flying out of the nest for the first time. You could also do that virtually through bird cams like eagle cams or falcon cameras that sometimes the DNR has set up online. You can follow a flower as it goes from flower bud to blooming, and how long that process takes and how long it takes before it's ready to disperse its seeds. You can follow the life cycle of a maple tree. If you study a maple tree, they do have little tiny flowers in the spring, and those become the helicopter seeds, and follow that journey, and then how long it might take for the tree to turn colors in the fall. How an apple or crabapple forms from flower to forming the fruit, and when it's all ready and ripe. There are lots of great resources out there for learning more about what you're finding, and there are lots of apps now where you can actually do a lot of interactive citizen science, which means you, no matter how young you are, can be a big part of tracking science and weather and animals and bee projects. I mean, it's really great how much kids can make a difference just by getting involved in citizen science projects. It can be water quality. It can be looking for garter snakes and frogs. It's just tons of opportunities. Some of my favorites are iNaturalist. That's a really great way to log what you find and also identify it. And if you don't know what it is that you took a photo of, there are people on the iNaturalist community who are really good at chiming in and saying, hey, I think that's a fill in the blank. The Merlin app is a great one for listening for bird songs and trying to figure out what it is you might be hearing. There are also field guides you can get at a library for books, or apps such as iBird that will tell you the different statistics about the birds you see. And I think it's called Birdcast, but that is really a fascinating website to check out. It tracks how many birds are migrating each evening across the state. And I would think because the St. Croix is along a riverway that you might have bigger numbers if you live nearby, where you could really see how many are passing through in a night. And maybe that'd be something you could discuss in your class. You know, what makes a particular night especially busy? Is the weather affected? Are there more birds moving through when the weather's nicer? Does it slow down when the weather is colder or rainier? It's really cool to watch and to find out what birds are moving through. Bell Museum of Natural History is a great resource, Science Museum of Minnesota, and I also really enjoy the Wild Wonder Foundation. They do a lot of nature journaling and getting kids outdoors. And let's see. I'm going to skip that and use that if we have time, but I've got step-by-step on how to draw a squirrel. I think we'll save that for the very end, though. If you're wondering what supplies to use, anything works. You can do just pen and ink. You can do colored pencils. If you do those, I really like Prismacolor ones are nice. They tend to be softer, so they blend a little bit better. Watercolor paints. You can see my messy little set, but it fits It's not much bigger than my palm, so it's a nice, easy thing to bring with me when I'm painting outside. And you can use what's called a water brush, and it has a little barrel you fill with water, and all you need is that brush and either a paper towel or a bandana that you can wipe the water on, and you don't need to take a jar of water with when you're painting. Final thoughts are to get out there, observe closely, follow your curiosity, enjoy the learning. Don't be a perfectionist. That's a huge thing. When you're looking at your drawing afterward, I want you to shut down that inner critic in your head that goes, oh, that's not good enough, or that's not right, or that looks funny. Shut it down and pretend you're looking at a friend's drawing, because when you look at a friend's drawing, then you're usually kind and, wow, that's really cool. And I like how you got that. And that's a great, I love your color. We're so much kinder to friends than ourselves. So try to think of yourself, be a friend to yourself, not a critic. And just enjoy how amazing nature is. The more you learn, the more you want to learn. There's just cool statistics and fun facts out there. And make sure you have fun. Everybody wants to have fun. And if you're not having fun, you're not going to continue doing it. And for me, it's just brings me so much relaxation and feeds my need to keep learning. And I love the nature drawing. And I'm going to go back to the squirrel page. And I'm going to put that up here so that if anybody is interested in following along with that drawing and wants to try drawing a squirrel, you can do that. And then if you have any questions, just throw them at me and I will answer them the best I can.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that wonderful presentation. As Lisa said, if you have any questions, please go ahead and add those into the chat. We don't have any right now, so feel free to walk us through the squirrel activity if you'd like.
Okay. So usually the first thing I start with is I kind of look at the outline of a creature. Look at the very outline. Don't look at all the elements, but just start with that kind of that rough outline. Think about what's the shape of the head. Does it have ears? Is there a tail? Where do the feet go? And you can see that in the second sketch. I've kind of labeled where the nut is, where the arms are, and just started kind of making those lines a little bit stronger. And then as I feel like I've got the main shape together, I press a little harder with my pencil and add in some bolder lines. And once you've got the basic outline of what you're drawing, it could be a tree, it could be an animal, it could be a butterfly, it could be a bee. The next thing after you've got the basic outline is just look at where the shadows are. Where are the textures on your creature? Is there a furry tail? Are there delicate wings? Are there funky little nails? I saw a snapping turtle last year. It had the ugliest toenails I've ever seen on any creature, but it made for a fun drawing. And then the last thing I usually add is trying to do shadows. If you want to make a drawing really pop, you have to get the darks and some lights. And once you have it drawn in, I usually go over my drawing with a marker, outlining pen, like a black outliner pen, and then I'll fill in the color as the last step. And sometimes I just leave my drawings black and white. If I like the way they look, I might just leave them, because the black and white drawings can be quite beautiful as well.
Wonderful. I love all of the messaging about just being in the moment, not needing to be perfect. It's all about joy and curiosity and learning. It's just great to use your mind and your body together to do something positive and creative. And I love your idea of keeping lists of things too.
Yeah, it's just fun. You don't realize how much you're seeing sometimes until you start writing it all out. It's like, wow, I'm starting to know my birds pretty well. And I think just the more you're in nature, the more experiences you have when you're open to it and paying attention. This last weekend, we had a yellow-bellied sapsucker. That's just fun to say. Hit our house. We've never had one hit our house before, and it was all sprawled out in our front garden. And I picked it up very gently, and I held it in my hand, and it just, it sat there and blinked a lot and was just slumped in my hand. But it gradually started wiggling a little bit more, and then it sort of shifted its weight, and then it was sitting up. And it took about 15 minutes, but I just held it and talked to it softly. And when it was ready to go, it flew off into a tree, and it was really a great experience. My mom has done that with birds that have hit their house before. And the songbirds usually take a poop in your hand before they take off. So then they're feeling good. Fortunately, this woodpecker didn't leave anything behind, and I appreciated that greatly. Any other questions about supplies or anything? Or
we don't have any questions in the chat yet.
Okay.
Yeah. It's wonderful to think about how much you can do, even if it's really intimidating to start. Like you said, you can break up the page. You don't need a lot of supplies. You can use whatever you'd like, and it's really for everyone.
Yeah. And you go with what you like. I mean, for me, I tend to like the plants and the flowers, so a lot of my drawings have that. But, you might be someone who loves to study the skies, and maybe what you love to draw are all the cool patterns of clouds that you can see, which I think are really cool to watch. Or you pay attention to the night sky. Maybe you could do some drawings of the constellations, or you could have drawn the eclipse and what the eclipse looked like. Or the moon, phases of the moon, or bugs. Maybe you just study bugs. Some people love frogs. Just make it your own and really, really have fun with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we still have a couple minutes. If anyone has any last-minute questions, feel free to throw them in. It's been a wonderful nature journaling session.
Thank you. I think it's fun. I think it really helps people relax. And you guys have so much coming at you at this age. It's kind of that chance to it's just you and the page and what you're seeing in front of you.
Yes, for sure. I tried nature journaling for my first time over the weekend in a different class with Lisa. And that was just really great. I'm someone with a really fast brain that worries about a lot of things. But when I was drawing, it was just calm. I was just focused on what I was drawing, what I was looking at. And it's just really peaceful to be creative in that way. So,
and even if you don't want to draw, you could also just take leaves and do outlines on them and write poetry in between the lines, or if you remember doing crayon rubbings when you were younger, you could also do a crayon rubbing over a page with a leaf behind it. If you don't like to draw as much, there's all sorts of different things you could do, or just put the colors you see in a swatch alongside the page. You don't have to do a full drawing, but just these are the colors that are out there today, and just go outside the lines.
Yes, absolutely. All righty. Well, that concludes our session for today. Thank you, Lisa, for your wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.